Call Village of North Fond du Lac Board of Trustees meeting to order Monday, June 3rd, 2019. Audience members are requested to sign in on the sheet provided at the registration table. Citizens wishing to be heard and topics not listed on the agenda may speak under item C. Citizens may be given an opportunity to speak during discussion of items listed on the agenda and are allowed only 3 minutes for comments. Disruptive discussion or profanity will not be allowed. Roll call of officers.
Horning.
Here.
Price.
Here.
Streeter.
Here.
Stutz.
Here.
Will.
Here. Stanford pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, citizen participation. Citizens are to address the board only. Statements are limited to 3 minutes. The board may not respond to items not listed on the agenda. However, you may ask for an item to be placed on future agendas. Any citizens wishing to be heard? Announcements, communications. Does anybody have anything?
Just update on North Bonnie Fest is coming up shortly, 15th, and tickets are on sale now.
Sounds like the bags tournament's gonna be big, huh?
Yeah, we got a lot of teams signed up, but we're looking for more yet, so the cornhole, I think they call it.
Yep.
Yep, so.
Very nice. And tickets are available here and at Cornelius primarily, and
Yep.
then any board member.
Yep.
And just one other thing, I think Darren came up with the idea, we're kicking around the idea of painting the caboose, and it was like ridiculous, like 15 grand. And did you come up with the idea for buffing it?
Yeah.
They started buffing it today, and it looks really nice. So, yeah, so they just started on the bottom half, so hopefully that'll last a little while, it looks a lot better. It was looking pretty dingy.
Yeah,
So-
they're gonna buff it, and then when they're done buffing it, they're putting a sealer on it.
Oh, cool, good, yeah, good idea, thanks. President's business and staff reports, library, Heather?
Thank you. We're in day one of week 1 of our summer reading program right now. And as of today, we now have 200 children signed up. So we've been very busy signing kids up to participate. Our adult and teen numbers are also increasing, but not as rapidly as the children's numbers. So this week we'll have some crafts. We're doing the drop-in crafts. So I just brought a couple examples of some things that the kids can come in and make this summer. We have like question of the week in the guessing jar, so kids can get excited about, making a regular stop in the library to do that. We also, I just wanted to mention that there's an author that we do carry in the library that will be at Reach Out Books on the 15th, the same day as North Bonnie Fest at 11. If you wanted to meet this author, her recent book is based in Fond du Lac, so that was kind of unique. So that'll be at 11 a.m.
And who's that?
Lorraine Snelling is her name.
And the name of what?
Half Done, I believe it is.
Nice,
Thank you.
thanks. Administrator Nick?
Thank you. Been spending a lot of time lately on the annual licenses for the establishments for their liquor licensing. Those are expiring June 30th, the new license effective July 1st. So there's a lot of work that goes into that and getting the inspections done through the electrical, plumbing, or electrical building inspection and the police courts, fire department. So there's a lot of things to schedule there and get that taken care of. Hopefully we'll get that taken care of on the June 17th board meeting to get all those passed. If not, we have to do it on the June 24th meeting, but we're shooting for the 17th, so they need to be done by July 1st. I attended the PFC meeting on Wednesday afternoon. All that was really on that agenda was election of their officers. We conducted the Board of Review on Thursday afternoon here in this room. We did not have anyone show up for that. So that's completed and submitted to the state. Final assessments, or final assessment. I've also been dealing with, for quite some time now, there was a switch over with our surveillance cameras and the way they were basically talking back to this building. There was a switch in the company, and we've been dealing with it for about 6 months, trying to get that rectified, and we finally did that last week. But now the server that they're hooked up to seems to have some issues this morning, so we'll keep working on that and move forward. That's all I have.
Thank you. Police Department, Darren?
Thank you. So last week, Dairy Queen on West Johnson Street stopped in and dropped off a bunch of dilly bars for us, just to show their appreciation for what we do. So they're gone, but we very much appreciate their thoughtfulness. Squad 40, which is the admin car, is currently out of service. There's an issue with the traction control system, so we called Rob down at the village garage. We're waiting for him to have a little bit of time to take a look at it. And then the only other thing that I have is we finished up our spring training last week. Every spring we do refreshers in DAT and firearms, and we were able to get that wrapped up department-wide, so that's all I have.
Thank you. Fire EMS, Jake.
Thank you. I apologize, I haven't been here for the last 2 meetings. We had a lot of stuff come up. I wanted to thank DQ as well. They dropped off daily bars back by us, too. And I want to thank Peter O'Leary because he actually gave the manager at Dairy Queen my phone number, so I was able to get in contact with him and get the guys a small treat. 6 of us went and certified it this evening at 5 for emergency services instructor. On June 14th from 1 p.m. until 6 p.m. we'll be hosting a blood drive at the community center, so we're planning on having a couple different agencies come out. Fond du Lac County Dispatch, I believe, is going to be there, and we're working on people from St. Agnes to promote Stop the Bleed. And lastly, I applied for the Wisconsin Forest Fire Protection Grant, and hopefully we get that awarded. It's a 50% match, which we have money in the budget for that, which we would get some Class A foam, which we utilize quite often, and some hoods, so that's all I have.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Where do we stand with the exhaust system back in the bay?
So that's been quite the lengthy process. I'm meeting with FEMA on June 12th, I believe, our grant representative, to kind of discuss where we're at in the process. Magna Grip emailed me this past week and told me that due to demand, the process might even go longer. So the due date right now is September 4th of this year to get it installed per FEMA, but we may have to extend that depending on what contractor they can get in and when they can get in to do it. So
That's okay with me, meant to extend it?
yeah, yep. So Vicky from FEMA has been really easy to work with, and I've been kind of going back and forth with her on seeing what the extension is and how long, and so,
Thank you.
yep.
Jake, I just have a question on the transport. How are things going with that?
Pretty good, yeah. The ambulance service, actually, we ran 57 calls between May 15th and June 1st. So 15 days, and it was pretty busy for that little swing there. And that includes multiple interfacility transports, as well as 911. So it's been quite busy this last month.
We'll probably look at that in July.
Yeah, right, I think we have a review coming up in that, in the next month or two.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else for Jake? Public Works, Darren?
Thanks, Mike. Just a couple of things. Crew finished up all our projects we were working on at the pool, so the pool could open last Friday, the 31st. We did quite a bit of work to the pool this year, inside the building and in the pool itself. Next, Saturday morning storm caused a few issues throughout the village. We had a problem with the SCADA system kicking out, and also the town of Fond du Lac booster station took a lightning strike and took out a couple PLC boards. We had PJ Cortons in today to rectify all those issues with the town of Fond du Lac's booster station. They will reimburse us the cost of anything associated with repairs made out there. Also, the flagpole on the corner of Wisconsin Harrison took a lightning strike, which burnt through the rope. Our flagpole ropes have steel core, and it blew the core of the rope apart. So pretty interesting looking at that today. And then, like was mentioned before, they started on the caboose at Yellowstone Trail Park today. They should finish it all tomorrow. And then lastly, I've been working on getting ads put out for the NEV, the street sweeper, and an old pickup truck that we're going to be selling on Wisconsin Surplus.
Thanks. And again, what's the schedule for the ash trees, taking them down? How do you determine that? I know a few people have asked
Yeah, it's pretty much we're doing it our crew when we have time.
Okay.
These projects that come up like the pool, I wanted to be cutting already this summer already. We took down 70-some trees last fall and winter. All of those have been ground now. We're getting around filling in the holes. Today we picked up 23 trees that we're gonna be planting this year. Most of those were trees that were removed in late 16, and about half of 17. And that's about what we have budgeted to plant this year. Every year I put in for a DNR grant for $20,000. We haven't gotten it the last 2 years. That would go all towards planting trees if we did receive that. We must be getting close to the top to get it one of these years.
There's like 300 trees left, is that right? Or-
I took a count earlier this year. We had just over 200 more trees to take down.
Oh, okay. Good, good, thanks.
What variety of tree?
There's a different variety, multiple different varieties. The arborist that we hired, John Redmond, comes and looks at what's in the area. There's some maples. I know there's one variety of elm that we're starting to use that's
Lindens.
tolerant. Lindens is another one.
There are some oaks that we plant in the parks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Probably about 10.
Yeah, I think our
8 to
list is
10.
about 10 varieties of trees.
Nice, thanks. Consent agenda. Number one, approve the minutes of the following village board meeting from May 20, 2019. Approve invoices and authorized checks to be drawn on the respective funds as indicated. General fund, $14,893.64. Outdoor rec nor Fondy Fest, $23.98. Library fund, $542.86. EMS fund, $348.70. Water department, $6,229.90. Wastewater department, $342.47. Stormwater fund, $265,081.13. Community development, $18.37 for a grand total of $287,481.05. And also approve the following operator license: Stephanie Amquist for Gens, Mindy Fieldbach for The Stretch, Isadora Caldera for Gens, Darlene McCauley for Gens, and Gina O'Neill for Gens. What is the board's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
And a second?
I'll second that.
And a motion by Will, second by Stutz to approve the consent agenda as read. Are there any questions? I just had one, Darren, I see that we purchased the street sweeper.
Yes, we purchased the new street sweeper. You'll see that it was $265,000. We had budgeted $230,000. The difference is gonna be made up by the sale of the old sweeper.
Okay. And are we planning to sweep for other communities?
We still do some of that yet.
Okay. I know we had talked about it since the board had changed. Can we get that on agenda and discuss that? Just, Okay, cool, thank you. Any other questions or comments on consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Administrative, presentation of the 2018 financial audit by Baker Tilly.
Good evening. You want us to go ahead?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Can you hear me okay? Good, okay. All right, again, thank you for having us. We always enjoy meeting with the board, and as in the past, if you have questions for us as we go through, that's one of the main reasons we're here. You can wait till the end. We really don't have a preference. I'm a director with Baker Tilly, and tonight I'm fortunate to have been joined by Ryan O'Donnell. Ryan has been in charge of, he's a manager with us in the energy utility group, and he's been in charge of utilities, doing that audit for the last several years. And Cameron Sawyer, who runs the governmental funds portion of the audit. So I'm going to leave all the tough questions to those guys. Before I jump into it, I believe all of you have the handouts Nick mentioned electronically. We'll walk through these.
Yeah.
Ryan and I are going to kind of split them.
Yeah, so what he's referring to is actually the charts that are on your tablet.
On the tablets, okay. So we'll walk through those. I think those have been pretty handy over the last few years versus flipping through the financials. Just mention a couple things. We come out and we do some preliminary work. We're really focusing on the internal controls and such, and we did that back in December. Seems like a long time ago. And then Ryan's group comes out at the end of February, I think, for a couple days. And then we come back with our team with the governmental funds for a few days in early March. And that's a pretty quick turnaround. We actually issued our financial statements, our opinion, on May 10th, which was a couple weeks earlier than even last year. And compared to a lot of our clients that we audit, that's a quick turnaround. And that's really the credit to Chris and everybody else here that pulls everything together for us. They do a nice job, and it really does go very well. And where we're still trying to get some finals out the door even now, the village has been successful in getting that out pretty timely for quite a few years now. So that's really wonderful. We issue, one of the main reasons you hire us is to issue the audit opinion on the financial statements. And we issue what we've done in the past for you, what we call an unmodified opinion. It's a clean opinion, and it basically means your financial statements are prepared according to GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles. And when I started this 26 years ago, I think there were 14 accounting rules, and we're up to 90 now. So there's a lot of things to follow, and not everything applies, of course, to the village or anywhere that we go, but a lot of them do. And so it's a lot to keep on top of. And fortunately or unfortunately, it's become more and more complex and hard to do. So it's great that the village continues to have that clean opinion each year. All right, with that, I am going to walk through the graphs and mention some of the numbers and where you ended up for the year. So the first thing on page 1 is this pie chart. Everybody with me on that? So this is a snapshot of your general fund balance at the end of the year. And in governmental accounting, you can have 5 different categories, and the village has had 3 in the past and does so once again this year. The first is that non-spendable $476,000, and that is made up primarily of an amount or 2 amounts that have been advanced, as we call it, or loaned to 2 other funds. And it's kind of like it says, it's non-spendable because it's not available. It's a long-term receivable, and the general fund for a number of years has been helping out TIF 2 and the ambulance fund. And so of that $476,000, $437,000 has been loaned to those 2 funds. $196,000, I'm going to get my numbers here, $196,000 to TIF 2, which is down from $222,000 last year. So it went down about $25,000. But on the flip side, the ambulance is up to $258,000, and it was at $143,000 the year prior to that. So that grew by about $115,000. So overall, that portion of your general fund balance, what's kind of locked up for those helping out those 2 other funds, went from $387,000 last year in 17 up to $476,000 this year. Okay. That middle category, assigned, is $439,000. It's made up of a variety of items that are in the middle of your financial statements in a footnote on page 47. But a big portion of it, $173,000, is to be used or applied in this year's budget, 2019. And then there's some other items in there for the canine and other police initiatives. I think a terrace tree program that's been in there for quite a while. Things of that nature. They're really internally decided. Nothing outside is deciding that or driving that, like GAAP or anything like that. And then everything that's left, other than those 2 categories, is the unassigned, so $1.2 million. That was 1.1 last year. So that's kind of what's left, like I said, so that went up a little bit. And so the end of the year, you ended up with $2.1 million in fund balance. In the previous year, you were at 1.9. So your general fund balance actually went up $270,000. Okay. It went up because your revenues were a little bit over budget by about $226,000. Your permit revenue came in stronger than you anticipated. And your investment income, which is what we've seen everywhere. Conservatively budget for that, and the market was good. LGIP, the state investment pool, is up. And so that drove that number. And expenditures were under budget by about $128,000. And the savings from those kind of ups and downs, as you can see in the back of the statements. But police, admin for police, risk management, and public works were all under budget this year. The pie chart represents the breakdown of percentage of those 3 categories like I mentioned. The unassigned is at 58%. Last year it was 61%, and the previous year it was 66%. So it's gone down a little bit, and that's because the non-spendable has grown a little bit through the years. Okay. All right. Yes?
Would you be concerned about that non-spendable increasing? I guess what's driving that increase in the
That's what's driving it. The TIF 2 has been slowly whittled away, and I'll touch on that again in a little bit.
What's
But
driving the increase in the ambulance cost?
it's the loss in the fund. I think when they took on the additional, you're going to have to help me out here, but some additional operations a couple years ago, that the costs have exceeded what they've been able to take in for the billings in that fund.
Yeah, it's a number of, I mean, it's mainly labor for the 6 full-time, which is the change he's referring to is when we went to the 6 full-time people, that the revenues just aren't keeping up with those
Yeah.
wages at this point.
And that's a modified accrual fund, so there's no depreciation or anything in there. Those are truly, like Nick said, primarily wages being driven and coming short of the amount charged off, or charged.
Do you know what that number was the year before last year? Like, do you have the 3-year of that amount?
The amount that it's been borrowing from the general fund? Yes, I do. It's,
143 last.
yep, 143, now 258. Okay.
And do we expect that to increase again this year?
No.
And we do, great questions. And we also talk to Nick and Chris and others at the village about that each year, and I know they're keeping an eye on it. So, as far as your other, your kind of overall question, though, I think the next slide will get at that. And you can see on page 2, this is an analysis, kind of a metric, taking a look at that unrestricted general fund balance, and we compare it to your expenditures. And that gives us a percentage. And at the end of 2018, it was 51%. So you can see it kind of plotted out on that blue line down below. And so 51% is a healthy number. GFOA, the Government Finance Association, always says you should try to maintain a minimum of 17%, which is 2 months. And that's basically for liquidity purposes, right? Just having enough cash to pay the bills. So that's that red line plotted out there. That's like the minimum you would want to go. And other places that we audit of your size, you can see plotted out with those green triangles. Okay, so you're above those, and so you do still have a healthy general fund balance, which is what you want, because that allows you to have flexibility in the budgeting. If you need to apply some funds to make your budget balance each year, you've been able to do that, and you've done that for the last several years, helping out the TIF 2. As you begin to share increment and stuff with TIF 1 with that, as it kind of goes through the general fund, just kind of unknowns, and also your bond rating when you go to market, that's a big factor too. Taking a look at the strength of your general fund balance.
John, do you think that because it's so healthy that we should redirect some of that to maybe capital?
That's a good question. It's really a management decision. A lot of places, what they will do is they'll set a policy and they'll say we want it to be between X and Y, and if it goes over, we are going to take that excess and we're going to apply it towards capital, and so that way you can reduce future borrowing. Yeah.
When you generally see that being done, do they remove the assigned out of it?
It depends. Some places do, some don't. A
This
lot.
includes, this is both assigned and
This is, and this is the way GFOA kind of looks at it too. I would say most places just focus on the unassigned. Yeah, because the assigned is kind of like, well,
right.
they're kind of protecting that money for intended purposes, and then to take it away, if you did include it, you'd want that percentage to be quite a bit higher. So, if I was to come up with a policy for that, something like that, if I was at the village, I would take a look at historically, maybe the last 10 years, where have we been, and come up with a range. I would never set a hard benchmark. I would come up with a range, and then anything over that, it can be slid over, so to speak, to your capital fund, and just sit there until you need it.
Do you have access, or can you share some of these policies? We don't have to do it tonight.
I do. Yep, I definitely do.
Maybe be interested to,
Yep.
maybe as a discussion point
Yep.
to see if we'd be interested in considering that.
Absolutely. Yeah, places that have done it will swear by it. It definitely helps.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the first two? All right, then 3 and 4, these are taking a look at your debt, and 2 different ways to look at it. 3 is how much debt do you have outstanding at the end of the year, and the next one is how much do you pay during the year, debt service. So 3 is looking at 2 different ways, and this is really focused on your general obligation debt. Some places that we go to, just their governmental funds will have GO debt, but I would say quite a few, including you, have some in the utilities, and you have about $490,000. But it takes a look at the GO debt, and how does that compare to your debt limit, and that's the bar graph on the left, and then your debt per capita. And again, the dark blue line you can see is the village, and how that has trended. So it's the red represents other municipalities, again, of your size. Not just that we audit, but there's this publication that's put out annually. This year they changed it. It's Municipal Facts put out by the Wisconsin Policy Forum. I think it was the Taxpayers Alliance before that. But it's got a lot of good metrics and information out there. So we brought that data into here, and you can see how you compare. So you're higher as far as the debt limit goes to other places of median, the median for the red, but you're still significantly under the high amounts. And this is really, there's a lot of things that come into here, and I would never say live and die by this. It's really what works for the village. But this gives you an idea of kind of how you do compared to other places. TIFs have a huge impact on this. If you looked at the village years ago, it was much higher. I think it was 70 to 80%. It was quite a bit, but as that TIF has been successful and paid that down, and that's the same in other communities too. Okay, so again, looking at how you trended over the years is important. And then on the right, it's your debt per capita, and you can see that went down a little bit this year. And in that case, that is actually under the average, the red line. I'll also mention, just looking ahead, you have 2 pretty significant GO debt payments that are coming due in your TIF 2 in 2020 and 21. I think it's about $350,000 in each of those 2 years. TIF 2 doesn't have the resources to pay for it, as of now, as you're all aware. But whether you refinance that or find some other mechanism, that could have a big impact on this too. Okay, then page 4 is again taking a look at your debt service. How much do you pay in principal and interest during the year compared to all your other governmental expenditures? This is non-utility for sure. Just excluding all that. We pull capital out of that because capital fluctuates up and down and is financed by the debt in most cases. And it really gives you a much better apples to apples analysis. So for 2018, it was 21.35% of what you paid, which is really right along. So again, the blue line is right along that purple line, as well as the green triangles of other places for a median kind of reading, and what bond rating agencies recommend being the purple line. So you're hovering right along that from year to year, and that's really what you're looking for, that you're not bouncing around or significantly higher. How some places at 70%, all I can think is that they're refunding. That must have been a bit of an anomaly. But most places, as you can see, it's pretty close to what the village experiences too. So very manageable. All right, the next few are going to just focusing on your general fund and where do you collect your revenues and what do you pay for your expenditures. And nothing too exciting about 5, but you can see taxes and intergovernmental make up the majority of what comes in for the village. If you add those 2 percentages up, 22 and 53, it's 75%. It's been 80% for the last couple of years. It swayed a little bit this year, again, because of that permit revenue being higher, okay, which is the next category down, regulation and compliance, I guess we're calling it. That's the red line. It took a dip or a jump upwards. But otherwise, very flatlining, which is what we normally see. Places that keep their capital outlay in the general fund have a lot of volatility, and that's hard to manage. You don't do that, which is good. And then on page 6, a pie chart of that same. You can see intergovernmental, 53%, that red portion of that pie chart. That's pretty high compared to a lot of places we go to because their shared revenues and such make them a pretty big proportion. And your taxes are less on a percentage basis than we normally see.
I mean, ideally, we'd like to see that purple line getting closer to the going down. I mean, because we heavily rely on our shared revenue.
Yep.
It's a large portion of our revenue.
Yep. Makes you a little bit more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on at the state and such. All right, 7, you can see now on the flip side, the expenditures, where you spend. And again, very common places we go to, public safety, public works, making up the majority. Add those up, 68%, and that's been consistent for the last several years. Really hasn't fluctuated at all. And page H, public safety is 40%. As you can see, that's police and fire providing those. Obviously, essential services make up the bulk of the expenditures. Not much change from the previous years. Okay. Any questions on the governmental funds information? All right. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to walk you through the utility.
All right, so I think in the next 3 or 4 slides, we have the water utility, and then we'll move on to sewer. The first one here kind of hones in on the sales. So as you can see, the residential and commercial, just a little bit of a swing, but the overall number there is just up slightly, which is what we expect. Usually with conservation efforts, you'll see that number go down, but you actually had about 166 new customers in residential alone, so that kind of offset that decrease and ended up with just a slight increase overall. On the first chart here, you can see that most of your gallons sold are residential here, and on the right side brings in your operating expenses, so you can see that what you're generating in water sales is clearly exceeding what you're spending putting into the system, and we'll talk a little bit about that more on the rate making side. On the next one here, sure.
I mean, from last year, I think we talked about why the residential is spiking so much more compared to the commercials because of some metering.
It was
We
a
weren't
change
correct-
in,
we
yeah,
weren't
there was a bunch
correcting.
of, basically, the apartments, there was a number of apartments that were being put into the commercial calculation. It was just a mistake in our system,
Okay.
and we had switched all those. So that's a large portion of this 161 customers would be just basically went from commercial to residential.
I thought some of the bigger medias weren't reading right or something,
Um,
low flow or something too, but. 'cause the
There
media-
is, there's that too. I mean, we did, that was, that, but that, the large change is because of the changing of how we report. That's why you see commercial drop and residential go up.
Yeah. Just for everybody else.
Okay, moving on to the next slide. As I'm sure you're aware, the water utility is regulated by the Public Service Commission. And the way they kind of report is on a different basis and more aligns with what they allow and disallow for rate-making purposes. And all this is filed in an annual PSC report. Really, there's 2 main differences. And the PSC report includes your tax payment to the village as an operating expense, whereas in GAAP, it's non-operating. So that'll cause a big swing, as you'll see in the first chart. They follow the same line, but your financial statement is going to be a bit higher because of that. And then your PSC reporting, it excludes depreciation on any contributed additions or capital assets because they don't want that funded by ratepayers. It's paid by the developers. So those are the 2 main differences. In that annual report, or in your rate case, I should say, you're currently authorized at 6.5 return, and that's based on your operating income and kind of where your net capital assets are. And as you can see, that's actually gone up quite a bit since 2016. Back in 14, I think that was a cold year where there were a lot of maintenance expenses for main breaks and services, which was seen all across the industry. So to be just below that is a good sign. Moving on.
Right. What is the PSC's stance on, as, we're approved 6.5, we make 7, we make 8, we make 9. At what point do they step in, or do they step in?
I haven't seen anyone step in because it's gone too much. I think really that will come more into play if you go in for a rate case. They're going to take a harder look because you've been above the line for the last 4 years. They're going to take a hard look to make sure. And that's a good case too, because just because where you're at now doesn't mean you won't need a rate increase in the future. It really depends, kind of driven off of what capital projects you have coming up and if you have big maintenance or other changes in expenses too. Good question. Moving on to the next slide here, we have your unrestricted funds on hand. This doesn't include any of the restricted, so on your bond resolutions, you have to set certain funds aside to make those payments. And that's really excluded here. So this is anything that's unrestricted. And in the industry, what we've seen is the general target is to cover 3 months of your operating expenses. And you also want to build in something for routine capital additions that come up every year. The chart here doesn't include any routine capital, but as you can see, the red, you're much higher than that. So from a cash standpoint, you're sitting very well. And then on the bottom half of this slide, you have your capital assets funded through earnings. So this is really just to show kind of your capital assets out there, what's funded by debt and what's funded by rates. So what we've seen is the minimum you really want on that is about 50%. Any more means that it'd be an indication that you had a lot of debt out, and it could put some strain on the need. If you need to change rates, you can be less aggressive from that standpoint. So pretty consistent. There wasn't a lot of capital activity this year, so we wouldn't expect that, but you're well above that. So another good indicator. And then lastly, for the water utility, going back to the bond resolutions, require you to meet certain coverage levels on earnings. So you have operating revenues, investment income, and your operating expenses. This calculation is defined by the bond resolution. So this really just looks at kind of where things shook out in comparison to what you were required. And 1.25% here is based on your highest annual payments on what's outstanding. Again, the utilities in 2018 and in the past are at least double what's required. So I think, with all things considered, the water utility had another good year in 2018 and is sitting healthy. Moving on to the next, I think we have three sewer slides now. Sewer utility isn't regulated by the Public Service Commission, so there's no 2 sets of reporting or anything like that. But this really just gives a highlight of where your revenues and expenses shook out. Probably should raise the chart up a little bit here, but as you can see, your operating revenues are higher than your operating expenses. So your rates are covering what you need to do to operate. And there was a hike in 2017 for operating expenses here. Most of the expenses for the sewer utility are the city charges for what they charge for treatment. And every year they kind of have a carryover where they'll bill you on an estimate for, say, 2017. In 2018, they'll look back and see, here's what your actuals are. We're going to true your bill up to what you actually incurred. In 16, you can see just over $1 million in operating expenses, and they jumped up to 1.3 in 2017. So really what that showed me was they budgeted a little too low in 16, and in 17, they kind of kicked that up, so the adjustment came in 17.
Yeah,
So
sorry to add to that, Ryan.
Sure.
Interrupt to add some numbers to that because I know those numbers quite well. But if you recall, we budgeted $400,000. We've done that for a number of years. It's typically been low, but if you recall through the budget process, I've said just wait. We'll have a wet year and it'll be higher. And it's usually 270, 280. I think the last couple of years that year was 540,000. So when you're talking about $1 million to $1.5 million budget, 540,000 is a third of that budget. It usually is about a third of the budget, so that's all that is. And if you take that 1 point out of there and put it back down, you know, everything's trending the same.
Yeah, and you can see in 2018 that that high number was trued up, so you still kind of go back down and it averages out a bit.
But it'll happen again. We'll see, like now this year, even this year, we're gonna be, because it was low last year, our budget for this year, our bills coming in, we got a true up last year, we got a credit. So our bills this year, at the end of the year, will maybe be 250,000. But then I expect early 2020, we'll have to catch up from this. So then maybe 2020, we're gonna see this spike again.
When do they do that?
No, they do it like, we get it with our first quarter bill, which is April time. So we did get a credit from last year
Okay,
for 2019.
okay. That seems weird because we're so low already.
Right, I was shocked, to be honest, yeah, I agree with you, I was shocked, because I thought last year was actually a pretty wet year, but some pretty significant events, and I was quite surprised to it.
Okay, moving on to the next slide. Similar to the water utility, what we typically see for a minimal target for unrestricted cash on hand is 3 months plus your routine capital additions. Again, as you can see, in 2018, you've exceeded that, so you're in a good position from a cash standpoint. And a similar calculation on determining kind of where you're at in terms of debt. What of your capital assets are funded by debt? It's really the same 50% threshold that's kind of seen in the industry, and you're up to 95% now. So it shows that you're in a good position. Your assets aren't funded by much debt, which gives you more flexibility from a rate standpoint. And then lastly, for the sewer utility, that is, the sewer utility has a little lower of a requirement on their bond resolutions, but again, this is all defined in there, so it's comes right out of your income statement. And a similar threshold, your minimum earnings is based on your highest annual for what is outstanding. And you've far exceeded that on the sewer side. So sewer as well is looking very strong, and things look good. Any other utility questions?
All right, there's one more slide, and it's a little bit hard to read. I apologize, but it's a snapshot of your two different TIFs at the end of the year. Since their creation, so each year we prepare what we call a TIF compilation that we send off to the village, and they enter information to the Department of Revenue, and then after July 1st they get together with the Joint Review Board and kind of go through what the status is of the TIFs. And this is basically those numbers. So again, since the creation of these two TIFs, TIF 1, as I'm sure aware, also includes your CDA. Most of the operations get folded into there too because they issued bonds years ago to get that TIF going. So that's really a kind of a cumulative set of numbers there. And as TIF 1 has done a nice job of building its value, it paid back the general fund, which it owed in the early years. It paid that all back a few years ago. And then, of course, it pays back the debt that's got just a little bit left on. And anything in excess of that for the last few years, it's been able to share, as we say, with TIF 2, move that over there. So this year, TIF 1 helped out TIF 2 for $71,096, and to date, it's been a $501,000 that's gone over there. At the end of the year, though, TIF 2, you can see, still had that deficit of $196,000, which correlates to what it's leaned on the general fund for to date. So that's slowly being brought down, about $25,000 decrease this year. And like I mentioned, TIF 2 is going to have those two payments on the debt in 2020 and 2021, and that's at $695,000 of what's still outstanding at the end of the year there. So what this tries to do is demonstrate how much are still recoverable through the life of the district. And you can see TIF 1 $513,000 is still recoverable when you add up the debt that's still outstanding minus what is got in fund balance. And then you can see what's still recoverable for TIF 2. Okay. Last year to collect increment is also noted on here, 2023 for TIF 1 and 2035 for TIF 2. Any questions on the TIFs? If not, there is another report that we issue. I'm not going to walk through it in detail. It's referred to as a management letter, and it points out anything that came up really in that early phase of the audit for the most part, where we're looking at internal controls, and nothing new in there as far as the control issues. There's a few items in there that have been there for a while now that more segregation of duties issues. I think there's 3 of them in there or so, and that's really just based upon the, it's hard to have enough people available to do everything and have complete segregation. There are some compensating controls for those, so we look at those each year too. The village has made a lot of progress in these areas. When I first started coming out, there were probably 1.5 pages of items out there, and they've really taken them seriously and resolved a lot of those. We would never suggest that you go out and hire new people to take care of every one of those comments. That's not the intent. It's just our responsibility to point these things out to you. And the other comment that's in there is the fact that we prepare your financial statements just like we do for probably 80–90% of our governments that we work with. In the back, there's some informational points. There's a few utility points as well. One new one this year regarding some restricted funds that were overfunded. Kind of, if you're going to have an issue with that, that's the better issue to have with it. So just to try to chew those up at the end of the year. And a couple other points that were followed up from the previous year, one of which was resolved. So, any questions on any of those? I don't know if you got a chance to take a look at it, but pretty straightforward. If not, as always, thank you for having us. We really enjoy coming up and working with the village. We were talking about that on the way up here, and seen a lot of change, and I always enjoy working with people, like I said earlier, very well prepared, which helps us as auditors. We can really focus on the areas we need to and try to contain costs and everything too. So it works very well, and we appreciate that.
And likewise, we'd like to thank your team, because it's I've been involved for quite some time
Yeah.
too, and it's nice to be familiar with what's expected and how things are supposed to be done, and you guys do a great job of it and very professional. So.
Yeah, we always encourage you to ask questions as you go throughout the year. We don't like to just show up once a year and try to catch up. So we stay up on the minutes and things like that throughout the year. But
And they do. They
Yeah.
show up and they start telling me things that I'm like, how do you know that? Well, we read the minutes. So.
We're Snoopy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions, you guys? All right, I appreciate it.
Thanks,
you.
Jeff.
Thanks
Thanks.
for coming. Appreciate it. All right. Moving on to number 2, discussion and possible action on newspaper delivery issues in the village. This is primarily the action, not newspaper. Just so
Yeah.
people are aware, this is every night. This is primarily for the Action Advertiser. I guess I could start out. I got approached earlier this year. I didn't know. We've had a few calls down to the village, and I think Sherry Banky sent an email. She talked to someone also. I don't know if you guys have talked to anybody, any concerns out there. But Dick looked into a little bit. There's been some cases. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I can just to give a real brief summary, at least what we're talking about is that the Action Advertisers mainly, there's been papers basically thrown, they're not being delivered really to the address, they're kind of thrown in the driveways, it ends up on the roads and driveways and sidewalks, and there's been a fair amount of complaints, people asking about it. I've tried calling the Action Advertiser, I've talked to several people. I've never gotten anywhere with it, and I don't think I'm talking to anybody local. It's a larger corporation now. I've tried calling the delivery person several times. I've left messages several times and gotten no response. So they're doing some research on this. There has been some Supreme Court cases in regards to that, because there's certain rights that they have, and I don't know. Honestly, I don't really have an answer what we should do or how we should approach it, but I think we just need to keep trying to contact someone and getting a hold of the right person. But I don't know if people can help in the village, and even if you have the delivery person or can catch that delivery person, at least get a name or something. I have a phone number for half of the village, but it's been unresponsive, so.
Yes, I just asked Nick if you would put this on the agenda to have the board discuss it and just see where the board is at, just some of the things that I wrote down that are issues out there. I'm sure a lot of people have slipped on those things on the bags, like when they fresh cover of snow, and like with my job, that's a real hazard, just for anybody walking in the winter also. Had a gentleman a couple blocks from here, got one caught in a snow blower, the snow was pretty deep and didn't know it was out there and jammed it up pretty good. If they come out of the bags, I've had a couple people complain about them coming out of those bags and then they just blow everywhere. Someone that I work with mentioned that, with them just delivering, like even the delivery people will just keep delivering that even when people don't pick that up. And, and that kind of creates a problem. It might, like if it's a vacant house, that creates a problem. Someone sees the, mail piling up or newspapers piling up, they're thinking, hey, that might be vacant and that might lead to some type of vandalism, that type of thing. There's a couple, like right on Wisconsin Avenue, there's like 3 or 4 of them out there, and they just basically different stages of mush on the driveway where they're not cleaning them up at all. So like Nick said, there's been some Supreme Court cases, and
There's been communities out there that have tried to pass ordinances, not allowing that to be delivered, and they've lost. So there has been some other ones that have been successful with being very specific about how they need to be delivered and where they can be delivered. So there's that option. I personally think that I'm hoping at some point we can get a hold of the right person locally and.
I don't know, do any of those cases address like creating some type of ordinance where you'd have to, where they'd stop delivering, then the people that want that, they just contact them or send out like a letter to everybody and asking people if they wanted to contact the Action Advertiser and they could get on the list. Because like for me, I'm not complaining because like a Ford Avenue, they haven't had anybody to deliver there for, a year and a half. So we haven't even had it out there, and you'd think it would be saving money for the Action, for their advertisers to get to the people that want that, because the people that don't want it are just throwing the recycling bin anyway. So I don't know if there's something that we could do that way. I don't know who was up first. Anybody know? Chuck?
I think Randy was, but.
Well, I just wanted to say that, good luck on trying to get a hold of somebody, because I've tried on other occasions to get a hold of somebody. There's nobody in the local office here, out on Willing Meadows Drive. I mean, even though, because if you go to the front door, they'll say, here's a telephone number, call. And you will not get a hold of anybody, because I've had to get a hold of them on another matter, to place an ad, for our church. And you don't get a hold of anybody. I mean, they'll trade emails back and forth with you. That's about the extent of the communication with them. I don't know, is there, I know what I've been seeing in the past is that even though there's, on the north end where people have the roll boxes, where there is a spot for the newspaper, they're not even using that anymore. They're tossing it, in the on the driveway, the sidewalk, what have you. So I don't know if there's a new carrier on that north end where I live or not. I don't know if you've noticed it, Mike. Or
I have my opinion, but I'll share it.
I've not noticed, it's always been in the mailbox, in the two.
Last week ours were thrown in the driveway.
Are they?
yeah, and the last couple of weeks
They
might have been in the
weren't
driveway.
Maybe the last 2 times.
Is there something where they could be charged with littering?
Well,
Yeah, I
that's
mean, is
the
it
thing,
something-
because, we're gonna pursue the homeowner to clean up the mess, and, that's not right, that they would get tagged for something that they didn't create. So that's kind of like, that's why I kind of wanted some agenda, just to get the discussion rolling and to see if we wanted Nick to pursue what we could possibly do. I mean, it could get costly, and I mean, if, I don't know, if it went to court or something like that, to try to get them to change the way that they do things. Because Gannett is, just huge, so, they have unlimited resources.
You'd think we could do something.
To answer your question, that's what the ordinances that were tried, were kind of on that lines, along those lines of littering, and it's a,
It's a
yeah, Second Amendment right to freedom of speech type of thing that's how they lost, is because they're allowed to do that. They're allowed, but now, that's not to say you're right, we could go after homeowners and say you need to get this off your yard, but, you know, that's not gonna fix the problem very quickly.
Even if the carrier is the one causing the littering? they
Yeah,
can-
I mean, I can.
Wow, that's
yeah.
crazy. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can look it up online if you just
Well,
search
I
for.
believe you, I just-
No, I'm just saying, because I was shocked when I searched for it online, it was like, filled up the page and it was all court cases. Yeah. Yeah.
Probably 99% of the time, mine's an issue. We're in the, more of the newer section where we're required to have a mailbox. Would you agree that most of the problem is in the older section where they don't have
Yep.
mailboxes? Absolutely. My question is, would it make sense to require the extra advertiser to put mailboxes out in front of everybody that wants it? And if they don't want it, just yank your post out? And I'm just throwing something out as a suggestion.
It's a good suggestion, because that's what some communities have gone
So
to.
if you want that extra advertiser, you have a box out by the road instead of, because they really don't have individual carriers that walk the street, right? They just drive by the car. So I mean, if you want that paper, I don't know if we could say if you're gonna deliver to the village, it's gotta be placed in the mailbox. I mean,
That's,
the extra advertiser box.
right, so then the question becomes, I don't think they only do, and I could be wrong, but I think they only do posts by the road.
Mhm.
So is that something we want in the entire
I'm just throwing out,
village too?
I mean, it works by us up or?
Right, the housing spacing's a little different now with
Okay.
the newer homes.
Okay,
You know,
I mean,
it's-
it's just one way to get them
Yeah.
to put it in the mailbox, and maybe a lot of these apartments and stuff wouldn't even want them, so maybe it would save them time and effort too, if maybe they wouldn't deliver half the papers. Just a thought.
Well, yeah, the apartments say they typically have the boxes that they deliver
Okay.
a bunch to, and then they can usually by the mail them.
But you know, a lot of these older homes, maybe they don't even want it anymore, so I just would say,
That's the thing, is there a way that we can require that it needs to be put in the box so they don't get it, or the customer has to ask to get that delivery,
Right.
Not just assuming everybody wants it.
by just having the mailbox, I would think that you're asking for it, you know?
And it just kind of blows my mind because everybody's so environmentally,
Right.
conscious now, and I mean, that's wasting a lot of
The
paper.
paper is still small now too, that's probably, even the extra advertisers are getting small, so.
Yeah,
I don't think that'd work because it's like, I think they probably operate at, everybody gets one. They don't care if you want it or not. It's, the delivery person gets paid for how many they deliver.
And their advertisers
And their
pay for how
advertisers
much.
are
Yep,
based on
I mean,
how many
you see them thrown everywhere. I mean, it's like, why is there one there?
Yeah, I have a lot on the corner where there's not even a house and they still
Yeah.
go up there. And I got one caught in my snowblower last winter too. And
I mean, I walk with my wife does a lot of walking. She's got a really good soccer sweep at kicking them off the sidewalk. But I don't walk as much as she does, but on those delivery days, it's just horrible out there.
So
And then the number one destruction of snow blowers is
newspapers.
is that type of deal. That's the number one destruction of a snow blower. I have read that more than once.
Ann, did you?
No, I was saying, I guess I can your sentiment that, I did get one caught in my snowblower and it was not very much fun at all.
So the question is, I mean, obviously we're addressing it right now. The question is, do we want to have Nick pursue, spend time on this and see if, I mean, there is information out there if you Google it and, you look at these court cases and you can decide on your own if you think it's worth pursuing because it could possibly cost us money if we created some type of ordinance like that. So I don't know, I'm just kind of wondering what the board
I
might
would like Nick to maybe assign somebody to look into it and see what options we might have. Doesn't have to be him personally, but somebody from village staff here to do some research and not say we're gonna go ahead with it, but see what else is out there and what might work or made improvements elsewhere.
And does Fond du Lac have the same problem?
I don't know.
Yeah, is it just the person here that's
That's what I'm hoping, and I'm hoping that if we can actually talk to the right person, which and Randy, I'm glad you said it because I thought I was maybe calling the wrong number. I've tried so many phone numbers and knocked at so many doors. Yeah, I'm 90% sure I'm not talking to anybody local.
You're not. You're
And-
not.
and-
Guarantee it.
And I've even asked, I need to talk to the manager, well, I'm sorry. We'll put it into our system, they'll get it. That's what I'm told when I call that, so.
I bet you in 5 years that paper will be gone. In 5 years that paper will be stopped being delivered. If they stopped with the grocery stores, that paper would be done. That's what pretty much funds that paper.
So, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add, this isn't, it's not new. We've been dealing with this actually for several years. We've got a lot of residents that have contacted us to complain about it. And over the course of the last couple of years, when somebody's been lucky enough to get a hold of anybody with the newspaper to request to be removed from the delivery list, they've been told that you don't even have that right. You have a residence, and we have the right, it goes along with what Nick was just talking about. It's freedom of speech. They have the right to provide those things because they're not charging you for it. They have the right to do it. As far as the slots at the road, I have one. Now I happen to be at the end of a circle, so for me it's hit and miss. It's kind of like in the winter, if there's a lot of snow, if there's a car parked, if the garbage cans are out, all of those things come into play. And if the garbage can is out and the person decides they can't get close enough to the mailbox, it gets chucked into the bottom of the driveway. So honestly, we've just kind of punted this one over the years because I don't know what the right answer is. I don't, they have the right to deliver them. I guess we have the right to demand homeowners pick them up and clean them up, but I'm not sure that's the message that you want to be sending. I don't know what the answer is going to be to this one. I don't think there's going to be a simple solution.
No, it's not been simple so far. It's First Amendment, I think that's second.
The one day I came down, I talked to Nick, it was bad that day. It was a while back. It was windy, and they were blowing all over the place. And it's like, I wanted to go load up my truck and go take it out to their parking lot on the frontage road. I just wanted to load my truck out there and go throw it in their parking lot. But I figured that'd probably get me in jail.
You know, if there's any communities or any newspapers that might start looking at the post office to deliver?
Oh, there's a lot of them, Waupun does it.
It's so hard to get drivers and people to do that, and the paper's so small now, so maybe at some point the post office will do it, and it'll get to your mailbox.
Yeah, like Waupun does it. They have a weekly flyer that goes out.
Yeah, without that one too, so, and you're going by anyway, so,
Yeah.
I don't know, you could haul all that stuff.
Yeah, well, West Bend does it also. I mean, there are a lot of communities that do it, but it just depends on, but those are typically local papers not owned by Gannett. They're yeah, so.
Might be cost effective, how you guys do it, so.
So is the board okay that if Nick pursues just seeing
Which I
what's out there?
kind of have been already, so yeah, keep
Okay.
going.
And if, anybody wants to take a look into it also, maybe get some more opinions, I'm certainly gonna see if we can find something, maybe someone figure out a way to get past this and.
I'm surprised somebody hasn't had an injury yet where somebody's had a lawsuit. I mean,
Slipped on one.
suing a homeowner or something, or I'm surprised that hasn't come forward yet. I'm really amazed at that for the way some of that stuff's out there. That's my main concern is, some older person out there walking or something hasn't got hurt yet doing that.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your efforts, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. All right, so, moving down to item number 3, discussion of possible action on personnel policy review.
That was just, the board had asked me to put that on there if there's anything that came up. I don't have anything that came up.
I'm gonna revisit some stuff that
Okay.
was highlighted first, but I'm not saying it's just running out, I just wanna try to make it as accurate as possible.
Okay.
The way we do business now, you don't have to agree with me, but I just wanna throw it out there, I just went through a few items. They're all right. We need to look at open records request. ATR. Page 16. So originally, back when we looked at this thing, highlighted, we're gonna check with the attorney. I don't know, much Chuck did that back when it was great. I had a question on, first of all, everybody there, the open records, number 2.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so right, towards the bottom, it put an expression during normal working hours require employee to take time off from work. And I'm okay with that, but the second to last sentence. In any case, the employer may allow inspection to take place at another time other than working hours. My biggest thing is it should be during office hours. Well, my first thing is it should be during administrative working hours. And in a place, other places where the records are maintained, if the time and place would be more convenient. I would say those records should stay in the municipal building, they shouldn't be able to take them off-site. That's the only records you got. Kevin, follow what I'm saying there?
I'm following you. I think this is regarding an employee at requesting open records.
Right. So unless you make copies of those, I mean, you're not gonna let them take them off grounds.
Well, open records request is,
Oh, it is.
I mean, generally speaking, they're getting something. It's not like they're, if it's an open record, it's not something,
Expecting personnel documents.
okay.
That's what I refer to that as their personnel file. Maybe I've read that wrong. You can have 2 times that you can look at their personnel file a year or at least.
Okay.
But I'm thinking that they should be able to leave, I understand going in private and look at them, and they should be doing normal office, municipality working hours. We should expect somebody to come back here at 6 o'clock at night and look at some of the records. Or expect your normal business working hours at the office, and those records need to stay in the municipal building.
It's, I mean, really, but it does say may. I mean, it's saying,
May, but then someone say I may be able to take these offsite, you could say no, why would you allow it?
The only thing I could suggest, and I don't know this without doing a little bit of research, but I'm 99% sure that this is all per statute, per law. And think about a Monfiles type case where you have somebody who's blowing the whistle and they may want to be able to look at whatever records they're talking about off-site so that somebody else doesn't know that they're doing what they're doing. Again, I don't know that that's what this is about, but I'm guessing that if we do a little bit of looking into the statutes, that's what we're gonna find, is that it's in there for very specific reasons. And like Nick said, it's may, it's not that we have to do it, but I'm gonna guess that's why that language exists the way that it does.
My question is, if you would have to make copies of this, how do you know that same personnel file?
Right, because while it says that they could, that we have to allow, or that, not we have to, we may allow the inspection to take place off-site, it doesn't say without us present. And I would never turn over the records to somebody and say, here you go do your thing.
That's
I
what
might
it's-
meet them off-site to inspect and go over the
So
records.
just so that's clear that employee, I mean, anybody looking at that, they understand that it's gonna be under some
Supervision.
guidance. They say, I'm gonna take my personnel record and I'll bring it back to you, so that there's.
Yep.
Just for some protection of that person. Just wanted to know that.
so, do you want me to look?
I just want you to look at that,
The
make sure
statute.
we're protecting those records and they don't get altered.
But do you want me to change the language? I feel like the language is okay, but if,
I guess I want to knock it off the rest of the five. You know,
Okay.
just doing it. I'm just looking at the
Yep.
documents at the village.
I would agree with Darren that, no one's gonna allow, it's gonna be under supervision. I mean,
We should state that in here. I mean, I'm good with that, as long as it, so we don't give nobody some false hopes, it doesn't say that I have to have, these records under, within,
I would agree, nowhere it doesn't really say that, even if it's done in-house, you hand him the folder or her the folder, and then,
you almost have to count the pages, you get all the pages back.
yes,
Right, you don't have duplicate copies, right? So, I mean,
you're right, it doesn't state that clearly what the process really is for that inspection.
but I'll check into it, but I'm thinking if somebody requested their personnel file, they don't necessarily have supervision. I don't think, I don't.
Not
Just-
present.
Just to give you, I mean, and I'm not sure that it's exactly the same thing, but, you know, we get other departments that come in and do background checks on officers when they're gonna go to another place. And it's pretty much standard across the board. We allow them to come in and inspect the records. They can take whatever notes they want. They can't take any of the records. They can't make copies of the records. They can't photograph the records. It's literally look at and take what notes you want. And I'm thinking that this is probably all the same. I think if we get into the statutes, I think that there's a reason that it says they may request the right to inspect their records as opposed to receive their records. And so I'm guessing that that language is all statutorily defined, all of those types of specifications that you're talking about.
I'm talking about that employee coming to it. Other
Right.
departments coming and looking at,
Yeah,
other people's personnel records?
it's pre-employment background checks, yeah. Yeah, we do the same thing. We go to other agencies and,
I'm surprised.
yeah,
Not-
yeah.
And just recall, Mike, just to remind everyone too, that the intention of this was, the personnel policy was to get the board to basically give it its approval. At that point, we are sending it off to legal for full review, just as another step in the process. But,
Well, even if you would highlight that, see if.
yep, no, I understand. I can check into this one, but just if you're concerned about some of the legalities of some of this stuff, we are planning on having it completely reviewed
I
prior.
did, but I just
Yep,
want to make sure we correct.
yep, right.
And, we'll go around a few more, this one goes.
Did you like the partner that shall take place at a location reasonably near the employee's place of employment? Or did you question that also?
I
or-
question it, but it has to be under the direction of the village. I hope the administrator or probably higher position officials for the village here, but they don't take the restaurant like that, they're fine with that. So this, there has to be some control of that goes on.
I think that's, we could dig our records out of the post
I think it
office.
should be, you know, even if they come in this room or a side office, or if they want to do it confidential, or if somebody wants to agree to come a certain time when there no other staff's around, so be it if somebody wants to meet up with them. I would almost agree with it, the fire chief's going to be on site here.
So would you strike that, take place at a location reasonably near the employee's place of employment? Just like the inspection shall take place at the employee's place of employment? Just take out a location reasonably near?
That language almost sounds like if you're in Merton Marine and you've got, you know, plant not where the HR is.
Oh, right.
We don't have that situation here. This is the one and only place that
Yeah.
is, it almost seems like that's accommodates a much larger organization, which lends itself maybe more to what Karen was saying is boilerplate. It's,
Well, let me just reach out and find out what I can find out about that before, I just to make a suggestion, so we don't spend too much time trying to figure out what it should say, maybe we can talk to the attorney, and I understand we want it to not leave here if it's a possibility, and that we want supervision if it's a possibility. We'll run that by the attorney and see what the response is. Does that sound good? Yeah,
Sure. Sounds good to me.
okay.
Just a couple, sounds like an opportunity. Just one it up to 507, review of position classification plan,
What page is that on?
page 19. As often as may be appropriate, the village administrator may review classification plan to ensure plans accurate reflects existing position responsibility. The village administrator may require department heads and employees to submit a position description when vacancies occur anytime there's reason to believe that there is a significant change in the duties and responsibilities of one position. Did we ever require the employees to do that?
Yeah, I think it's just a,
I understand department heads, did we ever require a line employee to help prep a position description for somebody that vacated the position? I shouldn't say you vacated, the time, the vacancy, yeah.
vacancies or,
Shouldn't the job
Or
description
if
be
it,
there?
Like Mitch's job changed and he
Yeah.
did something different for him, right?
yeah, I think this is just allowing us to look at, if we feel like over time the job description has changed, it allows us to realign the job description with
You
what
know, I just,
they're doing.
we asked the employee to do that?
Well, I think it's asking for their opinion.
Yeah.
You know, just like if they picked up some duties along the way that, and they continue doing them, then it's not in their.
I understand
current
asking
job
her
description. Yeah,
to rewrite a position description. I
Oh,
understand
gotcha.
asking for their opinion, but asking them to rewrite one, but I'm just trying to out there, is that something that we would ask the employee to do?
Yeah, in fact, I've done it. I mean, that's, like you brought up Mitch, I mean, he's really not a department head, he's an employee, and that's part of the process, is kind of saying, okay, what are you doing? And that's what helps write the job description.
Okay. We go to page 20. Promotion. Just think how we normally do things. Does this fit? If the employee's promoted to a position higher than the job content, the employee shall, is eligible for salary increase on the promotion. Kind of spells out how you do it. It ain't normally how we do it, is it? We pretty much, you make a recommendation of the salary range and what years of service that you want them on that step schedule. Would we want to spell out precisely how it has to be? The usual, I understand, is that, I'd rather see it, the village administrator will make a recommendation to the board on the salary level and the years of service or what step of that classification. I would like it more, leave it in the hands of the administrator to make that recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree with you that it's not normally done this way. In fact, there's probably quite a few times it hasn't been even where it should have been.
I would rather leave it in the hands of administration here to bring a recommendation to the board.
But isn't that what the second part of it says? The terms and conditions and amounts of any such promotional adjustment shall be approved by the village board and be offered to, accepted by the employee in writing prior to the date of the promotion.
But it does say that you get the lowest of the next step, I think.
It says whatever's agreed.
Right.
It's kind of,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So we could just take the second sentence completely out, right? That they're eligible for a salary adjustment upon promotion, the terms and conditions and amounts, right? That work?
Yeah.
Take out the second sentence.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. Simplifies it.
on a 601 policy, I just think just an oversight, we missed, I looked at your previous suggestion, I think you missed, the village administrator shall oversee an active recruitment policy. He shall oversee an active recruitment and selection policy.
601, sorry.
And the original thing you had here, I think it just got missed.
Shall
Oversee, you got it down lower.
oversee.
You look down,
Second sentence?
It says the village administrator shall enactive.
Yeah.
you go down to 604, you kind of got the same language down there.
Gotcha.
Not a big deal.
Shall oversee an active recruitment. That's right? All right. Yeah, you're right. You had it in your notes?
Your notes in here, you had it,
Oh, really?
and it just was missed, not a big deal. We just going through again, so we can give another look at it. We'll leave it at that for right now.
Good find.
Anything else on that one, Mike, or?
You think
Anybody
4
else?
hours would be enough?
Maybe.
I said, you think 4 hours would be enough?
On the
24th.
That's what we're trying to do now.
No, that's good. I'd rather have 20 minutes chunks here.
Simple stuff.
We start no.
Okay,
We'll order a pizza.
all right, so, anything else on the policy? All right, any communications? Any, what's that?
That's it, go ahead.
Any new business?
I'd like to just see if there's any objections to putting flags behind that, where Stewart's has their display in the corner of Prospect and Winnebago. Put like a half circle of flags behind there during the, like the 4th of July, maybe Red Bonnie Fest, like we do at the Veterans Memorial.
Are we planning to move the poles over there or no? Or were we planning to do poles there or not?
Doing flag poles there in 2020 is what it's budgeted for in the capital.
These would just be temporary flags.
Oh, yeah, like the ones, yeah.
Like at the Veterans
Yeah.
Memorial
I think it'd be a
flags.
nice.
Yeah, that would
statement,
look
you know. If there's no objections, I'm gonna pursue that with the applicants.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would look nice. Just for like special occasions.
Yes.
Cool.
Are these
if-
gonna be flags that end up getting removed then by the people that put them out? or-
No, Public Works.
Public Works.
Okay.
Just like we do on the walkway up to the Veterans Memorial.
Okay.
It'd be the same size flags, same type of pole that we put in the ground, but just do a half moon around the backside.
Gotcha.
If the Optimist Club doesn't fund this, what do we look at for an option then?
Well, that'd probably about $100.
I've done some pricing of 3x5 flags
So we can do that internally.
and
It's really not
the
an
cost
action
of the
here.
poles.
All right, just looking into it. All right. Anything else on new business? We've done the closed session. Need a motion to go into closed session, please.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session, discussion of personnel issue under Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, sub 1, sub C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Discussion of an employee.
You get a second, please.
I'll second that. Okay, go ahead.
All right, I got a motion by Horning, second by Price to go into closed session. Get a roll call, please.
Horning.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Streeter.
Yes.
Stutz.
Yes.
Will.
Yes.